Welcome to the NetworkingStar podcast. I am Jeffery Boyle, and today we are going to talk with another one of these amazing entrepreneurs about how to be successful, what you need to do to succeed. And I am joined by Daniel Steininger, and he's a consultant, he's a speaker, he's a teacher, he's a Wall Street. He's written for the Wall Street Week and the New York Times. I mean, Dan, you've done just a little bit of everything. So welcome to NetworkingStar.
Well, thanks, Jeff. And I read your background, and you put the package together too. A lot of energy. I loved watching and reading your clips on your website. It's very good, and you're really in the center of where all commerce is: sales. You make it happen. So I think that's fantastic.
It's interesting. We were talking a little bit beforehand, and you called yourself a reformed lawyer, which we both are. That my father was a very successful attorney. He was a tort attorney, so did a lot of different big cases of torts, and then he became a judge. And one of the things that he told me, he said, Jeff, if you learn how to sell, you will be successful at whatever you decide to do. It doesn't matter if you're an attorney, it doesn't matter if you're a medical salesperson, you will be successful. So give me a little bit of explanation with you that you have had a lot of success, and what in the world does sales have to do with that?
Well said. Boy, he had a lot of wisdom. I always see young people say to me, well, I want to be in marketing. I said, fine. But before you do marketing, you got to learn how to sell, because that's where it all starts. Absolutely. And he had great wisdom. By the way, I don't say I'm a reform lawyer, because I don't think lawyers can be reformed. I would say I'm a recovering lawyer.
Okay.
I've done this for about a decade. But, it's sort of where I learned. As a young lawyer, they never teach you, and I'm sure when you went to law school, there never was a course on how to get clients. So I joined a firm, and they said, look, we want you to bring in some clients. Well, what? How do I do that? Do I stand on the, and that was before we had advertising. So what do you do? Stand on a corner? I'm a lawyer? So I learned to be very creative, put in play all of ideas, everything from join nonprofit organizations, gave away free legal advice. And people said, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a lawyer. Well, you're not so bad for being a lawyer, and learned that I'm really actually a pretty nice guy who can be trusted. So yeah, sales is the critical. They always say the Fortune 500 would be a non-existent entity if you didn't have sales. You go nowhere.
Yeah.
And even in a world of e-commerce, sales and how you sell is still critical. It's just a different way nowadays, but you're onto something, that's for sure.
My business law professor, I remember him saying that he couldn't stand entrepreneurs. They scared him to death. They scared him so much to death that he had to get out of business and become a teacher. So at least he was honest enough to say that they drove him crazy, because he couldn't stand the risks that we take. And I told you before we started recording that I went to law school to protect me from myself, because as entrepreneurs, it's oftentimes ready, shoot, aim, and then it's too late, right? And so explain a little bit of that. So you really have this amazing background. Explain a little bit of that process of how being an attorney helped you succeed in so many different areas.
Well, I think, and I'm sure they teach you, first of all, how to, analytically, how to think analytically. You learn, of course, how to talk on your feet, and you also learn how to write well. But anyway, in our law practice, one of my clients was a large financial institution and had a lot of problems, which I loved. But I ended up knowing their management team, drafting contracts. And so, what financial instruments are nothing but contracts. So I was used to the product. So when their CEO became disabled and unable to serve, the board of directors asked me to run it. And I said, no. I had a lot of friends at the Harvard Business School, because I went to law school in Boston. I said, I swear, I was a former Peace Corps volunteer, spent 2 years in Kenya, East Africa. They all seemed too greedy. I'm not interested. But they said, well, okay, do it part-time between. And so I did. I did my law practice, and I went over the company, started making some changes. Things got better. And that went on for a year until my partner said, look, we can't have the president of a big company in our midst. We'll get sued. Make a decision. And so I made a decision, and that's when I learned that. I will say this about business, and to all your people who listen to this, and I say this in with all due respect for the legal profession, business is a lot harder. I remember 6 months into my tenure as the CEO, the labor union was coming after me. Some of the management people are, disrupting. They would ask for a strategic plan, and I say, "What's that?" I mean, it got kind of crazy. And I remember my wife saying, we're on a walk, "You don't seem very happy." I said, "I'm not. It's miserable." And then we both reasoned it's got to get better. Who would ever be a CEO? But I did learn on the job, and then you learn. But the thing I want everybody to know in business, you got a tough career. It's tougher than law. I mean, every year in law, I got a little better. I could increase my billings. In the world of business, you never know what's coming at you. It can be the market changes. We would have financial instruments. Suddenly, interest rates were 14, 15%. Look at what's happening to loans today. Every day, people are cracking up, doing stupid things, people you hired. The market changes. You are constantly being thrown at HR problems, marketing, innovation, sales, you name it. And so that's the bad news. The good news, it's one of the most exciting things you can ever do with your life. Business unleashes you to compete, to use your talents, to think and solve problems. So it is for all of those who run businesses, including yourself, it's a tough journey, but there is truly nothing more satisfying. It is really, you're never without a problem, without a challenge. So you guys, I respect all business owners because it's not easy.
Yeah, we were discussing a little bit too. It's like sometimes our pre-discussions are as entertaining as what we're talking about. It really is a blood sport, and it's really interesting. I'm not ashamed to admit my wife and I have a tough time choosing what show we're going to watch at night, and we have settled on old reruns of the show Survivor. And
Ah,
sometimes on Survivor, people walk off crying and they're so disappointed that people would betray them. And I just always say, that's business. I mean, it's terrible. It's terrible that that's in business, but if you have thin skin in business, you will get ripped up.
yeah.
And I think that the biggest difference between me now and the big of when I was starting really my entrepreneurial career is I expect people to betray me. And I really try to be as honest as I can with people. And sometimes the more honest you are with them, the more you offend them because people a lot of times don't like to hear the truth. But business can be like a game of Survivor where people are betraying you and people are talking behind your back and people are trying to use you to get to the next level. And as you say, it is a very difficult thing. But explain a little bit of how you then transitioned as you became an attorney, as you started to do more with business. How did you do that transition?
Well, I studied much like you do, people who are leaders and successful at what they did. And this is a point where the Japanese were starting to overtake us in the car market. And so I started visiting some of the big new Japanese plants in the United States, Nissan and so forth. I would actually interview their CEOs. And why I did that, because I was trying American management philosophy, it didn't seem to work. And there was an article in the Wall Street Journal in which they interviewed the CEO of Nissan in their first plant in the United States. It was down in Tennessee. And the reporter of the Wall Street Journal was getting very frustrated. He said, he was just mad. He wasn't getting his questions answered. And the Japanese president finally said, well, what is it you want to know? He said, well, I want to know how you build your cars. And he said, well, why are you talking to me? I'm just the president. Go out there on the assembly line and talk to the people that are building the cars. Whoa. I did a piece in the University of Michigan Review and said, it's all over for the American auto industry. We will never compete with people with that philosophy of management. And guess what? Toyota, Nissan, Honda, the biggest selling cars in America who invented autos. So, but the bottom line is for anyone who in the world of small business or any kind of business, the most successful people, yourself included, are people who see problems and challenges as something that bring it on. I'm gonna make lemonade out of lemons. That because you're right, it's blood sport, but don't be discouraged. The problems you're seeing are things that come with the territory, but there's no greater satisfaction than when you can succeed and overcome those problems. So when I talk to groups or businesses, I always begin by saying, look, if you don't have any problems or challenges right now, you can leave because bless you, that's wonderful and keep a good life going. But when I interview people and always my life, even today in organizations, when I interview people, one of the important questions I've asked is, when were you knocked down by life, whether personally or professionally? And what did you do about it? I will not hire somebody who hasn't been knocked down because those are the people I trust. They're going to learn how life is. You get knocked down, you got to get back up. How do you do that? So for the listeners who say, I have all these problems, if I didn't have these problems, I'd be successful. No, I don't know anyone who's successful that hasn't been knocked down in life, got back up and kept fighting. So that's important to remind. And that's the world of business. Epics it is about the same. It's about what life is. Life is never this upward trajectory of wonderful things going to happen. Talk about shows. Yellowstone's highly popular right now, and since you're in Idaho, you can well understand the West and the whole mystique of cowboys and all that. So everyone gets an inside look at what is a great, highly successful, really rich family like. Total chaos, total misery. People are, all sorts of things are happening. It's dysfunctional. This is the world. Money won't alleviate all your problems. Success can only bring more problems or challenges. So that's life, and that comes with the territory. Once you understand that, and you realize you're under a lot of, that's okay. It's okay because that's what it is, and you're going to get so much joy out of conquering the challenges you have. So.
Yeah, I love that. It's it's pretty interesting that that you talk about all you're going to do is have more. I think money just magnifies who you are, right? If you're a low down, loathsome person, you're going to be worse. But it's also has the ability for you to be a much more generous person. But what it also does is if you have some problems, if you have a lot of money, you have more problems. And I heard a quote once from a gentleman, and I really loved it. He says, "Don't look for a life of ease. Look to be so talented and so gifted that you can take on ever increasing amounts of problems with greater amounts of ease." And I thought, wow, that was really powerful because in business and life, I've said it before on some of these. I'm a father of 5 kids, and
Geez, 5 kids. Oh, my hat goes off to you.
well, let's
Going
be
out
clear.
on
It's
two
it's
kids.
it's my wife that did most of that. She is the CEO of our home, and she has that thing running. An incredible how she does it. But I just I've got to pay for all of them. But as they grow up, and as I see how they can take on issues and how they can handle those, it really makes you proud, right? To see that hopefully you instilled some of that work ethic into them. Explain a little bit. You say you have so many different things that you've written. When you do speaking, what is it? What is it that makes you happiest when you speak in front of a group? What are the topics? How do you like to interact with the people?
Good question. I think the important part is, and this is, I don't see myself as a Tony Robbins motivational speaker. I'm not there going to give people all these bullets and all these great insights. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not who I am. I mean, I've been a teacher. I teach a course on innovation at Arizona State University. I've got a winter home there. What I enjoy is helping people, giving them the tools to do. You do it innately because you just are a creative person. But I basically teach people. I mean, I'm there to help them navigate the problems of life, whether it's professional or personal, either way. And all of us are survivors because we had ancestors who were very creative and
Yeah.
were able to survive, or we wouldn't even be here. It's innate for us to be able to survive. But what's the framework for what you need to do to survive and prosper as a human being? So the joy I get is identifying the need of all people to survive by being creative. There's one very interesting insight, and this is the neuroscience now backs this up. As we age, we all thought, well, we lose brain cells, and then eventually you die. Well, guess what? All of the neuroscientists today have been able to look inside our brains, see from PET scans and MRIs, and found out, to, to the shock and awe of everybody, you can actually grow new brain cells. You can actually grow new connections up there. Now, how do you do that? By challenging your brain. I golf with people, and these guys, some of them have exits from companies, 30, 40 million. I'll say, so what are you up to? Not much of anything. How's that going to work? When you're not challenging your mind, not doing those sort of things, you actually do not grow the brain cells. Your brain starts to close down. So it's innate in us to try to grow our minds and our abilities. So I love giving audiences and the people I talk to in business, here are the tools to embrace the problems of life. And here's how you can navigate those. Here's the set of tools you can take with you and apply to everything. Where you're going to take a vacation, whether you should move to Costa Rica, whether you should become a lawyer, whether you should retire, whether you should invest. How do you answer those challenges or problems? What's the framework? So that's what I take joy, being that teacher.
Well, obviously, a guy that's surrounded by books, where you're doing that, it becomes of a, I think that there are people that are inherently learners, right? And it's really interesting to me. It's as my hair became thinner until I finally just have to give up and just shave it, what's remaining left, and admit that, oh my goodness, I'm not just middle aged anymore. I'm on the latter end of middle age. It doesn't feel like it because I am constantly, as you were talking about, trying to learn. I study new languages, and when you go to a new place, and what I have found is the people that are that way oftentimes are the ones that just remain young. It's really interesting. I didn't think about the correlation between that, but you also look at some of these celebrities who have made it, and the struggles over, the financial struggles over, and they lose their happiness. I've said this for a long time, and I love what you just said, because I think we're happiest when we're progressing. I really do. I think that the struggle, we are made to struggle. And when you get rid of that, you get rid of a lot of the happiness in trying to get better.
And it's a universal, having lived in Costa Rica, that applies to people living in Costa Rica. I spent 2 years of my life in the Peace Corps as a teacher in Kenya, East Africa. Same thing there. You would think somebody is poor and they don't have shoes, and a lot of areas they had mud huts they were living in. You think, oh, they must be the most miserable, unhappy people in the world. Just the opposite. Most of them were a lot happier than the Americans I knew. And why? What's innate to all of us, you go all the way back to Aristotle 2,000 years ago plus, and very simple would you find what happiness is about for human beings. It's not the latest drug you've taken, the latest dessert you've had, the newest car you just bought. What gives people the greatest happiness is the ability to achieve a goal, to achieve something in life. The Maslow hierarchy, you've got the basics of food, sex, and all that. Then you go to social relationship. The top of the hierarchy is self-fulfillment, self-actualization. You're right. There's where the greatest happiness was. And I always give this example for all of us. You've had 5 kids, people who've been parents or have children of their own. When your children were real young, 5 months, 6 months, did you have to tell them to start to learn to crawl?
No.
Did you tell them to start to play with the toys you put in front of them?
No, they made their own
And then,
toys if they had
and then
to.
when they started, why did you have to tell them, we want you to walk?
Yeah.
And then at some point, they learn the most complex activity a human being will ever do in their life. And it's all over by 5, the ability to communicate. And you say to your child, okay, Andy, if you don't talk, you're not going to eat dinner tonight, or you're going to get punished, or we'll reward you with money. No, they were jabbering like crazy. Creativity is innate to all of us. So what happened to us? Why, when we get older, do we suddenly lose it? Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know. You go to school and you're not rewarded for creative answers. You're able to get the right answers on, and then you graduate to the world of work. And you're not going to say to your boss, yeah, I know you want me to do this, but I have a different idea of how we should be running the company. So we're rewarded for complying. So what I do is get people back to their natural, innate desire, such as yourself, to kick on challenges and use your own creative abilities to take the joy that comes with creativity. So it's it's wonderful to do, and I enjoy sharing because it's worked for me all my life. I've had 5 really very close calls with death, and most recent, by the way, was a rattlesnake bite in Arizona.
Oh boy.
We talk about that. But in each of those instances, it was my ability to be creative that helped me survive, and that's why I'm alive talking to you today. So.
Well, I'm curious about the rattlesnake bite. I hope you had cell phone service when you got bit
And
by a
I'll be
rattlesnake.
very short about it because rattlesnakes have a sort of intriguing thing. I was hiking outside of Arizona with my wife, beautiful hiking country just outside of Phoenix, and I had a hiking pole. There was no rattlesnake in the trail, but he must have been off to the side, and I heard a rattle. And the second I heard the rattle, it was too late to react because he bit me on the back of the ankle at the same time. And it doesn't hurt that much at first. You think you have a mosquito bite. But I, really learned. And he zoomed by me. I turned around, saw him, and I had my hiking stick. I think I'll whack this guy. And the toxicologist who treated me at emergency later said, be glad you didn't. I've treated people for 3 or 4 bites from the same snake. Anyhow, the long and the short of it, she called 911. Eventually they came, checked my vitals. I was able to walk to the rescue vehicle, and they took me to a helicopter. And of course, the pilot introduces himself. Captain Kirk. The kind of day I'm having, I'm the Easter Bunny. And so we get elevated. I'm taking pictures of the skyline of Phoenix as my leg is starting to swell. I said, well, I never realized that rattlesnakes, they kill the tissue around the bite, and suddenly you're feeling pain like you never. He said, "No, don't worry, we'll give you fentanyl." I said, "Fentanyl? People die from that? No, we're not going to give you the Mexican cartel fentanyl." So they tried that. They gave me morphine, synthetic morphine, oxycodone. The pain, it took 4 or 5 hours to get the pain down. Anyhow, the long and the short of it is, but my wife had alerted them that he's been bit by a rattlesnake. Bring antivenom, which they did. So when I'm in that helicopter on the way to the emergency room, Banner Hospital in Phoenix, they're putting 9 vials of antivenom in. I get to the hospital later, and recovery starts. And a few weeks later, after I stabilized enough, and I was flying up to Portland, Oregon, I'm in the Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, and there's like 5 million people. People are coming up to me and said, "Oh, how's your rattlesnake bite?" I said, "How did you know that? How do you know that?" They said, "Oh, you were on the evening news in Phoenix because you're the first person that ever got antivenom on a helicopter." It literally changed the whole protocol of how rattlesnake in Arizona, you get 200 to 300 a year, how it's done. So think about the creative requirements of coming up with that solution, alerting them. He's got participate, giving feedback, and help change, not only help my life, and I don't have to have anything, legs cut off or anything, but it changed the whole way rattlesnake bites are dealt. So this, again, where creativity can help save your life, much less help you navigate the ordinary problems of life.
Look at you. I think that you've used that as a business example before, or you're so intelligent that you were able to come up with your metaphor for me so quickly on a business metaphor from a rattlesnake bite. That's crazy. Obviously I think you do enough outdoors, and I've got a video on YouTube that's got over 1 million views when I was filming my leg surgery after being hit by a motorcycle, or on my motorcycle by a bike. And, in the end, people asked, I'm sure you, is like, why were you taking pictures? It's probably the same reason why I was filming my leg surgery. What else am I going to do? I'm not just going to sit there.
Helicopter taking pictures of my leg in the Phoenix sky. Well, how did you survive that? That must have been pretty brutal.
It was pretty bad.
I'm at the home of Harley Davidson, Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Sure.
Yeah. So, and motorcycle bikes are rough things to get hit on.
Yeah. My dad used to always say as a kid, because our neighbors, when he was an attorney, they lost their legs. So every time I'd take off on my motorcycle, my dad would always say, "Don't lose your leg." And I sat there on the road looking at my road, and I thought, "Oh my goodness, I'm going to lose my leg. My dad's been telling me not to do this." But in the end, it just made for a good video. And I do a lot of exercise to make sure that it stays healthy. But Dan, I think you and I could probably talk for hours. You've got so many great stories and such great experience, but I'll let you have the last word on this one. Tell people how to find you, how to listen to you. And I think you've got a lot of wisdom to impart.
Yeah, well, the only people who should reach out to me are people who've got problems or challenges.
That's not very many people. That's everybody.
Irish would say, things are going good. Don't worry. Trouble is just around the corner. But my name is Dan Steininger. You can email me. That's easy. Dan, short first, Dan Stein, Stein, like a beer stein, danstein101 at Gmail. Or you can call me 414-430-2204.
Dan,
I'm there to help you, give you some framework to solve problems. I enjoy doing it because it's helped me survive in life and grow and prosper. But the main message above all else, the problems and challenges, whatever they may be, untimely deaths, things that can happen to all of us as human beings, everyone knows about post-traumatic stress, which you, I'm sure, had after your accident. But I always tell people there's also a thing known as post-traumatic growth. Some of the worst things that happen to you in life can be things that allow you to turn into a new direction and go on to do things in your life you never would have imagined. So whatever the tragedy, whether it's a rattlesnake or a motorcycle, don't let it stop you. I'm happy to chat with you about how to get out of that trap and move on to them and make your life successful, or turn the problems in your business around. So.
Well, it's good stuff. I just wish I would have been picked up by a helicopter instead of an ambulance. but thank you so much for being with us, Dan.
Wonderful chatting with you. And keep it up. You're a serial entrepreneur, and I can understand why.
I don't know how I will ever stop. I think until I die, I'll be doing something.
Don't. Yeah, you'll lose brain cells if you do.
That's the reason. I just say that my head gets so hot that my hair fell out. But anyway, it's great to be with you.
Okay, thank you. Take care.